Hey guys, how is everybody doing? 2023. Wow, it's almost over. 2 days left. Kind of scary. Really scary. So, with the end of 2023 just around the corner, you were going to get a series of rankings. So the first ranking, as you are watching right now, is my ranking of all 12 comic book movies that we got in the year of 2023. Some of them are Marvel movies, some of them are DC movies, and some of them are actually comic book movies that some of you may not have known. So with that all out of the way, here's my own personal ranking of all the comic book movies of the year 2023. Think about it, the hat's coming off. I don't need a hat. You don't need a hat for a video. One thing before we begin, just to remind you, all of you, this is just my ranking. This is no one else's ranking. This is not the correct ranking. This is just my own personal ranking. These are the movies that I liked, the movies I did not like. These are my viewpoints of these movies. So, that's just my what everything you're about to hear is just my opinion. So don't get offended or feel like you need to hunt me down or just or unsubscribe to my channel because I didn't say what you wanted to hear. This is my opinion. Instead of being that one dickhead on the internet, put your ranking in the comments below instead. With that all out of the way, let us begin. Number 12. Now, just because this one is at the bottom of my list doesn't mean it's a bad movie still. It's just the one comic book movie of the year that I just flat out just said it was just okay. And that is Shazam Fury of the Gods. Now, I had not seen the first Shazam before until the other day when I was preparing for this ranking and my DCEU ranking, which you will be getting very soon. And I had no interest in this film back when it was first coming out. I never watched it in the theater. This was also around the time to where Warner Brothers came out and said that they were rebooting the DCEU and basically said, "Oh yeah, you know our 4 movies coming out? Yeah, they basically don't fucking matter." But so when I heard that, I was at the same time going, well, if it doesn't matter, then why should I watch it? And two, it just looks like a generic comic book film that I might just say it's fine or I just didn't care for. And I just thought it was fine. I didn't hate this film, and when I actually watched the first Shazam before I watched this, I actually quite enjoy the first Shazam. That is a great film. That's a good, like, heartfelt film with the characters and all that. And for a sequel, it's okay. I just felt that the kids were just more annoying, if anything, and I didn't really care for Billy in this film. This film, in my opinion, it's just okay. And the film is just very generic, like, cause you got just villains that I don't care for, and they're very generic. And the final battle is cool and all, and I did like seeing Billy fight a dragon. Other than that, this film is just okay. But coming in at number 11 is the new kid on the block, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, the final DCEU film and the DCEU film that closed out the DCEU franchise. Now, this I will say this now. This is not a good film to close out the DCEU. And I don't think they really intended it to be that. If anything, the final DCEU film should have been The Flash, because that could have been a pretty good send off to this universe and could have been a better setup for the DCU that is coming out. But this film, I just don't really care for whatsoever. I lost complete faith in this film when there's reshoots, delays, the Amber Heard shit going on, putting this film in trouble. And I just lost complete faith in this film. I had no interest in this film whatsoever. I even debated if I would even watch the film. And I hadn't seen the first Aquaman before I watched this film, but I just never had an interest in it. And when you find out that's the highest grossing DCEU film, you kind of go, wow, that's wow, just why? Why is this film the highest grossing DCEU film? Why? But when you think that the first Aquaman is the highest grossing film in this universe, when they announce the sequel, you think, oh, maybe that film will do okay, maybe just as good, maybe I don't know. But when Warner Brothers decides to come out and say, "Oh, we're rebooting this, so it doesn't matter," and so that kind of lost faith in that. I also feel with the whole Amber Turd thing going on with this film, her being in it still. Fuck you, Elon Musk. Yeah, you decided to put her in it, huh? Yeah, it's your fault. I blame you. You ruined Twitter, now you gotta ruin Aquaman. Screw you too. And yeah, this film just doesn't work for me. The movie, like the first film, it's just too goofy for me. The only thing I found myself like really ever really caring for in this movie was Jason Momoa and Patrick Wilson's characters and their chemistry. I thought they were great in this film. They had pretty good chemistry, and they were probably the only great things about this movie. I also thought Black Manta was pretty better utilized in this film instead of being pushed to the side like he was in the first Aquaman. But this is not a good way to close out the DCEU, and that's what this film is only going to be known for. The film that ended the DCEU universe. Coming in at number 10 is the kickoff to the MCU's Phase 5, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Now, I thought this film actually didn't really look good when I first saw the trailer, and once you see it like multiple times, it just gets boring after a while. But when you think that the very, very mixed bag Phase 4 was, you think, okay, maybe Phase 5 will do a little bit better. Not doing so hot right now. And with this being the kickoff to it, and Kang being the main villain, you were like, oh, sweet, maybe this film will be halfway decent. And it is not. And I will admit this, when I first watched this film, I actually did like it for some reason. But when you rewatch it and think about it more, you go, oh, what the fuck was wrong with me? And when you think about it, the only thing that this movie really does and the only thing that carries this entire film is Jonathan Majors in the lead role as Kang. All controversy aside with Jonathan Majors, I think he's really great in this film. He's great as Kang, and I'm wondering what the MCU is going to do with him now. Because after Jonathan Majors incident, I don't know what the MCU is going to do now. But if they keep going forward with Kang in the universe, I feel this was a pretty cool way to introduce him to the big screen in a way. Well, I don't think the film was a good way to introduce him, but I did like him in this movie, and that's really the only thing that's really fantastic about the film. And some of the visuals were okay, I guess. Number 9 is another MCU film, and the final MCU film of the year, The Marvels. Now, I like the bottom three films I just talked about. I didn't have faith in this film. The trailers, none of them sold me, and this is a sequel to Captain Marvel, which is probably my least favorite MCU film, right there with Thor: Love and Thunder, and especially after Miss Marvel. I actually kind of enjoy Miss Marvel. It's not half bad, but at the same time, it's just like it's eh. But when you get a sequel to Captain Marvel, that's not a good sign. The only reason that movie made $1 billion because it was right between Infinity War and Endgame, and this was like the film to show who the Captain Marvel character is. And that's the only reason that movie really made $1 billion, let's be honest. And when you find out they're making a sequel to it, you kind of go, why? Like almost every Marvel fan does not care for that film. And I will admit, this film is better than Captain Marvel. I do prefer this over Miss Marvel, but the film it's a generic comic book film. I do like the the chemistry between the duo. I do like that, and Miss Marvel really did carry the film. But the villain, like I've said before, is a generic villain that I just didn't care for, and I don't even remember her name. They didn't and it's weird. But this film also kind of feels like Captain Marvel 3 because there's like a subplot in this film that feels like should have been Captain Marvel 2 because this film just feels more like Captain Marvel 3 and it's weird. And I don't know if this film is supposed to be a follow-up to Secret Invasion because I only watched like the first two episodes of that show and I just didn't care for it. I couldn't get into it. But I don't know if this is supposed to be a sequel to it because there's some shit going on here that I just didn't know. But that's what I don't like about Marvel movies today is that you basically have to do your homework. Now he's just like, oh, you gotta watch this film. Oh, now you gotta well watch this film. You gotta watch these 17 films before you gotta watch this film. And it's like, can we just make one good, decent Marvel movie that just stands on its own and not being a follow up to a film and then being a setup for 17 more films? Can we stop doing that because I'm getting tired of it? Now, I really do enjoy all of these films, and all of these films I do see myself rewatching. Coming in at number 8 is Transformers: Rise of the Beast. I believe this is the only comic book films I watched in the theater. twice. Once just to watch it and one on Father's Day. That was a fun experience. So, I'm not a big fan of the Transformers franchise. I did grow up with them. I did grow up with a lot of them. But once you get older and you rewatch them as just a film, they're not really good, great films, except for Bumblebee and the original Transformers film. I do like those films. But when I found out there was this new Transformers coming out and I saw the trailers, I just thought this film just looks like a generic Transformers film. But I was pleasantly surprised how much I like this film. When you watch this film as a Transformers film, it definitely works, and it's a great film. But just as a film itself, it's not very good. But I did like this Transformers film, and I'm glad that Michael Bay wasn't the one in the director's chair. I'm glad that the director of this film is a huge Transformers fan, and he knew the project. That's why I really enjoyed this film, because I just really enjoyed this film, surprisingly, and I'm not the biggest Transformers fan. I didn't really grow up with Transformers. I was more of a I didn't grow up with that animated show. I was more of a Power Rangers guy growing up too. But I was pleasantly surprised how much I liked this film because it was really enjoyable. It's my second favorite Transformers film. I do prefer it over Bumblebee. Sorry. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised how much I liked this film. Maybe because I went into it with low expectations and I just thought this film was going to be horrible. But I was pleasantly surprised how much I enjoyed this film. Coming in at number 7. Get your pitchforks ready. The Flash. Yes, The Flash. Now, I will admit this fully. When I first saw this film, I really did like it. I thought it was a great film. But when you watch it a second time in the theater, I thought it was pretty mid. I just thought the film was really mid. And when I feel that this was one of the more disappointing films of the year because this movie was absolutely hyped the shit. Because after the Ezra Miller controversy, a lot of people thought this movie was going to bomb, which they predicted fully. Because look where that went after so many months. And with Ezra Miller controversy, all the behind the scenes drama with this movie had the writing on the wall that it was not going to be a good film. But then when the film started coming out, people said that this was the best DC film since The Dark Knight, the best DC film in years, the best DC film ever made. This is the film that we need this year. This is one of the best films of all time. And when you go into this movie with that kind of hype and then you watch it, you go, that's the best film since The Dark Knight? What? Like, what crack were you smoking? If if that's why you enjoyed the film, then give me some of it so I can enjoy the film more. But what really, really kills this film is the god awful CGI. I was kind of wondering when I first watched the film. I was like, am I watching like a film? Am I watching the version of the Flash that isn't completely finished yet? Because if I ain't, then there's something going wrong at the post production over there in Hollywood. It's like, dude, what the fuck? But the film itself, watching it as a DC film, I do think it's a pretty good film. I do like seeing Michael Keaton come back as Batman. He's one of my favorite Batmans ever. I do like Supergirl in this film. I think she's pretty cool in it. But I feel a lot of people are just upset about this film is because they didn't get Ben Affleck as Batman in their film. They didn't get Henry Cavill as Superman in this film. I think that's why this film's getting a lot of hate. Although I would have liked to see Ben Affleck and Michael Keaton teaming up as Batman in this film, because that's what I thought was going to happen when I first heard this film was coming out. But sadly, we didn't get that. But as a DC film and as a Flash film, I did like it. I did like the emotional parts with Barry Allen. I thought he was pretty utilized great, but I didn't know how to feel about the two Barrys there. I do think Ezra Miller's performance as Barry Allen and the Flash was great in this film. Although the one of the berries in this film is very annoying. But I do enjoy the film, but it was one of the more disappointing films of the year. At number 6. Oh boy, this one's gonna get me in trouble. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I'm sorry. Just hear me out. Hear me out. Hear me out. Now, I'm not saying this is one of the more disappointing films of the year. I'm not saying this is the worst film of the year. I'm not saying this is one of the worst Marvel movies of the year. I felt this movie got really, really overhyped for me. This film got so overhyped for me because some of my friends who got to see it early said it was like, dude, you gotta watch this film. It's so funny. It's so good. It's so emotional. It's the best Marvel movie since like ever. It's like, holy shit, this movie might actually be good. And then when you hear the early reviews saying, oh, this is one of the saddest movies ever made, and then when you watch some reviews and they're saying like the one thing that will happen with you once you watch this movie is like you're going to cry. I don't care if you're a soulless monster, you are going to cry in this film when you're watching this film. When you go into this movie with those expectations, I didn't get that. Sure, I will admit this movie is sad. I will admit I was a little bit sad for the Rocket character. We all know why everybody cried. But when you go into this movie with the expectations of crying and being the best Marvel movie ever, I didn't get that. I still prefer the first Guardians of the Galaxy. That I grew up with that film, and I just prefer that film in general. But this film is a good goodbye to the Guardians characters. It's a good goodbye to all of these characters, except for Star Lord, because I hear that he's coming back still. But this film I did like. I'm not saying it's bad. It was just really overhyped for me because of the expectations of me walking into this film really ruined it for me. But I still liked it, and I do like how this is just a standalone Marvel film. Like I was talking about with the Marvels, I hate how these movies are just setting up films to where you gotta watch 17 films before you get to watch this one. But no, you don't have to watch any film before this film. If anything, you could just watch the two Guardians movies before it to watch this film, just because if you're in a Guardians of the Galaxy mood. I love how this film is just a standalone Marvel movie telling a great story, saying goodbye to all of these characters because we'll never see the original Guardians of the Galaxy again. And I'm glad I got to say goodbye to them in the perfect film to say goodbye to them. I like that film because of it, and this movie is emotional at times. I think Chris Pratt gives his best performance as Star Lord in this movie. I love that film for that reason. But again, walking into this film expecting to cry and expecting this to be the best Marvel movie of all time really does kind of ruin your experience. At number 5 is Blue Beetle, my favorite DC film of the year. I had no expectations with this film. I thought this movie would just looks like a generic comic book film, which it is, I will not lie. And for some reason, it kind of gave me Black Adam vibes for some reason, and I don't care for that film too much. When I saw the trailers for this film, I thought it was going to be something like Black Adam, but oh my god, I'm so glad that it wasn't. And this film was originally going to go to straight to HBO Max and just be a direct-to-streaming film, but thank the Lord it wasn't. I loved this film so much. I was so surprised how much I loved this film. I love the Blue Beetle character. I love the dynamic between the family. The suit of Blue Beetle is awesome. I love the action in this film. I love almost everything about this film. But I thought the villain in this film again was just very generic. That's what you should be hearing from me for these next few films is that the villain was just very generic. That's all I kind of expect from a Marvel or DC film or any comic book movie at this point. And yeah, but this film surprised the shit out of me because I thought this movie was not going to be any good. My dad even said that he wasn't going to watch it because he thought it wasn't going to look any good. But when you finally watch the film, it's amazing, and I am so glad that this film finally went to theaters, and I'm glad I actually gave it a chance and watched it on the big screen because it was one of the biggest surprises of the year and my favorite DC film of the entire year. And number 4 is going to be Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. Now, when I first saw the trailer for this film, it just looked fine to me. I thought it was going to be an okay, passable, like almost 2 hour animated Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film. I grew up with the Ninja Turtles as a kid. Almost every kid has at this point. If you didn't, then what kind of childhood did you have? I grew up with the 90s films and also the Michael Bay films, surprisingly. And when I heard this film was getting made, Seth Rogen was involved, which gave me a little bit of kind of hype for this film, because almost anything Seth Rogen produces, you'll get my attention, because a lot of the movies and shows that he produces are end up really good because anything he's involved in turns up really funny or good. And that gave me a little bit of hype. And I did like the idea that teenagers were going to be voicing the Ninja Turtles, which was a great idea, and I don't know why they never did that. And then when you finally watch the film, not only is it one of the best animated films of the year and one of the best films of the year, but it also ends up my favorite Ninja Turtle film somehow. This Ninja Turtle film speaks to me as a teenager, to my generation, because they talk like teenagers my age do. They listen to songs like my teenagers do, like my age do, and all that. This Ninja Turtles film just speaks to me as a Ninja Turtles fan and as a teenage fan, and it makes the actual turtles feel like teenagers, like I feel no other Ninja Turtles film ever did for me. But this film, and it also brings like that coming of age story to the Turtles, which is like a genius idea. And I love the character of Superfly. Like, that's a character I never heard of until now, and that's a character I want to see so much more of. And they got Ice Cube voicing Superfly, which is a perfect casting once you watch the film. This became one of the most surprising films of the year for me. I absolutely love this film, and I cannot wait for its sequel. And number three, which might actually surprise some of you, is actually a comic book film. And that is Extraction 2. This is a direct-to-streaming Netflix film, which is a sequel to a action film from 2020. Now, I didn't really know much about Extraction. I had never seen the first film. But when this film first came out back in June, I didn't really have much interest in it. There was great reviews for the film. People said this has one of the best action sequences of the in the entire film, one of the best action sequences like ever for them. But I just never had an interest watching it. But when I was planning on doing this video, and I was like, okay, which comic book films are which, and I looked at other videos of people doing it, but Extraction 2 showed up on that list, and they said yes, this is based off a comic book series. And I looked up the comic book series, and I was surprised to know that it's based off a comic book series. And so I gave the first film a chance, and I was like, where was this film for me? This first film is awesome. And I watched the second film, and you go, oh my god. That was amazing, especially that 21-minute long action sequence in this film is amazing. Like, they got actual cars, helicopters, I'm pretty sure an actual train too, if I'm not mistaken. Like, Chris Hemsworth is at his best. Like, the entire time when I was watching the first film, like the first half of it, all I could see was Thor. But after that, it's just like, dude, all I can see Chris Hemsworth is Tyler now. Like, this guy is badass. Like, this is one of the best action movies of the year, and might be one of my favorite action movies ever. Like, it's might be one of my favorite movies of the year too. Like, this was one of the biggest surprises for me too, because I did not really expect anything from this film. And I cannot wait to see what they'll do with Extraction 3. This is one of the best comic book movies of the year, and almost took my second place. Okay, top two. My number two. I don't want to say it. I'm going to get in so much trouble. Coming in at number two, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Now, hear me out. Hear me out. A lot of people are going to start thinking I'm not a Marvel fan after this video. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is one of the best films of the year. One of the best comic book films ever made, and one of the best animated films ever made, and probably the best looking animated film I've ever seen, if I'm going to be honest. This is probably the best looking animation I've ever seen in my life. I love Into the Spider-Verse. I grew up with that film back when it first came out. I watched that film to death with my dad. I absolutely love that film. And as soon as they announced this film, I was jumping with excitement. It was one of my most anticipated movies of this year, and it definitely lived up to the hype. The only thing that keeps it from number one is that I hate how we live in this world to where it's a part one and part two situation, to where it's like, oh, you want to see this full story? We're gonna split into two parts, and we're gonna leave you on a cliffhanger and make you, oh yeah, see you next year. But who knows when we'll get Beyond the Spider-Verse, because that movie got delayed to shit, and we might not see that movie until 2030, all we know. That is the only reason it's at my number two. But if this movie told a complete story and left me, like, happy with its ending and to where I would want to see Beyond the Spider-Verse, but yet I was happy with the complete story setting up the next film, if they just didn't leave with a goddamn cliffhanger, I would have loved this film more. I'm glad that it worked for other people. I'm glad it worked for you if it did. But I just don't like how we live in this world where we live in this part one, part two thing. That's why I love Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, is because that told a complete story to where it ended, to where it didn't leave a cliffhanger, but just left with a complete story to where you want to know what they're going to do in Part 2. But this film just doesn't do that. It leaves you with a stupid cliffhanger that it makes me wait a few more years. And I thought we were going to get it back in March 2024, but then we got the news that it was getting delayed, and we'll never know when that film is going to come out. Reports saying 2026, but I have not seen one single piece of news of the film. The only news I've heard is that they're still doing storyboards of the film. That is not a good sign. So then we might not get this film till like 2026 or later. We'll never know. Coming in at my number one is The Killer, the new David Fincher movie starring Michael Fassbender. I thought this movie was going to be good, but I didn't expect it to be this fucking good because I love David Fincher. He's directed some of my favorite movies of all time, mainly Fight Club and Seven, which are his main ones. I love Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. That's one of my favorite movies of all time. I adore that goddamn movie. And when you hear that he's making a new film, and it's going straight to Netflix, and the straight to Netflix thing kind of worried me because Netflix has not been doing good these last few years. Because now when I hear that Netflix is making a new movie, I kind of go, well, shit, it's probably not going to be good. But this is by far probably the best Netflix film of the year because you get David Fincher, who's the most which is probably the most iconic director of all time, right there with Christopher Nolan and Quentin Tarantino, in my opinion. And he's making a new film about an assassin based off a comic book series starring Michael Fassbender of all people. And I love Michael Fassbender. He's a fantastic actor who absolutely killed it. Get it? Because the title, an assassin, you get it. I know you get it. And he does a great job in the leading role. I love David Fincher films, so of course this film is great. But I didn't expect it to be my favorite comic book film of the year, and you can definitely tell that David Fincher saw this movie as a passion project because you can really tell that he put a lot of his love into this film because when he was talking about this film, making this film, you can definitely tell he was very excited making the film. You can definitely tell he was a fan of the comic books. I never really read any of them, but I did kind of get it what they were about. But when you watch the film itself, it's like, oh my god, dude! Like, I didn't care for David Fincher's last film, Monk, that went to Netflix a few years ago. But when I heard that this film was going to Netflix, mainly because of Monk, I was kind of scared. But when you just watch the film, my god, is it amazing! Oh, that took a long time. That took longer than I expected. Thank you all so much for watching my ranking of all 12 comic book films of the year. Let me know your ranking in the comments below. And Happy New Year's to everybody. Hope all of you had a good Christmas and all that good stuff. And if you like this video, like it. If you loved it, subscribe, hit the bell notification so you will get notified for my latest videos. And of course, until my next video, see you all next time. Dear Lord, that was tiring.